Welcome to Network Scanning, Section 2 of Learning Practical Network Scanning. In this section, we're going to take a look at issues that you can have with hosts, how to go about doing discovery, how those functions happen, port scanning and how that works, as well as application and OS detection and some methods used for that. Welcome to Host Issues. This is video 2.1 in Learning Practical Network Scanning. In this video, we're going to take a look at determining if a host can survive a scan and ways to mitigate any issues you may have. Something that a lot of people do not think about when they go about doing ping sweeps and network scanning and vulnerability assessment is whether or not a host can actually survive a scan. There have been instances in my own work throughout the years where I've seen devices crash based on specific things that you do with network scanning or SNMP polling. For example, not long ago I've actually ran across some really old managed power strips that had a web interface, and whenever you would poll it with SNMP, it would crash. Every single time the management would be wiped out, and it would actually reboot the power strip, causing the power to go out on the device. It wasn't just the management interface, the entire thing would reset. So that was obviously a very serious firmware issue that was unfortunately unpatchable because they were too old. So it's something you have to take a look at and consider when you go about doing scans. So you have to take a look at the age of the hosts that you're going to be scanning. How old are they? Are they possibly too old to handle the kind of scanning you want to do? What's the uptime of that device? After so long, a lot of devices, depending on what they're running, they can have issues, and it might be better to have them on a fresh boot before you try to mess with them and scan them. What operating system is it running and what version? Is it a very old version of Windows? Is it a very new version of Linux? Who knows? Is it something in between? Is it a custom thing? Is it running Minix? Who knows what it could be running? What is it? Does it have any potential issues with scanning? What are the versions of the applications on it? Potentially. It's something you should find out from a scan, but you may actually run into problems where an application may crash because you're sending it some packets it may not like. Also, which manufacturer is the device you're going to be scanning? Contact them potentially to find out if there are any known issues. And what is the importance of the asset to the company? Is it a power strip that's running a production environment in a 24/7 operation? Is it a critical asset? Or is it just a back-end management system that no one really cares about? So once you've identified some of the issues that you could run into doing a scan on a system, you have to come up with ways to mitigate that and how to go about completing your scan successfully and checking off that box. So you have to think of ways to resolve this. What could you do? You could patch the system ahead of time. Kind of counterproductive depending on what kind of scan you're doing, if it's a vulnerability assessment, but depending on what kind of issue you may run into, such as that power strip example, you may have to patch it before you actually go about scanning it so that it doesn't die on you. Make sure you contact the system owners. A lot of larger organizations, they have different departments that may own the hardware. It might not just be only IT that owns stuff. It could be an application department as well. You might want to contact them if there's like a software side. Contact the manufacturers, as I mentioned. Find out if there's any known problems with these devices that you're going to be scanning. And do a test. Find a small test area or a small piece of the network that's not critical and run a scan on that stuff and see what kind of issues you may run into. Does it seem okay? Does it bog the network down real bad? Does it cause things to reboot? As long as you have a decent test case, that would be a good way of going about that. And in your discussions with the system owners, find out a good outage window. You obviously don't want to take down everything during the middle of production time. So find a good outage window where you can run this scan, because a lot of these scans take a long time, especially if it's a very in-depth vulnerability scan. Other ways to mitigate from a more technical perspective of actually performing a scan is to use SYN scans rather than full connection scans. So as we go through some of these pieces of software, you'll see that there's different ways of doing these scans and finding out what kind of services and applications and operating systems are on these devices. And you can do so through a number of ways, including SYN scans and ACK scans and full handshake scans and sending commands to a fully connected port. If you do just the initial SYN, that's pretty harmless from the TCP handshake standpoint. So it shouldn't really run into any issues there. You can slow down your scan. So rather than bombarding a device with 5,000 packets per second, maybe it's only 100. It'll make your scan go longer and your outage window worse, but it might resolve some issues and keep things from getting too loaded up with trying to respond to all your different requests and connection attempts and all these things that the scan system is going to do. Use a smaller port range. Do you have to scan all 65,000 ports, or do you only really care about maybe 100? In this video, we talked about some issues you can run into with hosts, as well as some mitigation methods that you can use in order to prevent issues, hopefully, and reach out to those that are responsible and make sure everything is okay to do a scan.